Hey, everybody, welcome into another edition of the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with the amazing Dr. Owen. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Did everybody get their fill on turkey?
Absolutely.
I ate really good. We actually went on vacation in Oklahoma, the whole family and all my sisters and everything like that. It was really great to kind of get away. And it was a great experience. So I am not in my usual spot. I'm gonna just address this elephant in the room right away. I am currently sitting in a parking lot about an hour from my house. But me and Dr. D are so excited about the guests that we have on today, and just the information they have around parenting strategies and this idea that less is more around parenting. And like the whole point of this podcast, right, Dr. D, is we're trying to help parents do just a little bit better with this whole parenting thing. Like for me, like in reading you all's article, like it really resonated to me because there's a lot of time that I feel like I'm not thriving, that I'm more surviving, right? And how can we get to this place where we're giving our kids more autonomy to make mistakes and have some of those natural, like I think you guys had the line in the article that I really like. I say the word resonate because that's just how I feel about it. I'll probably say that like 75 times today. But like it really resonated with me because it's like, just let the world teach them, like they're going to forget their coat. They might be cold. And guess what? Next time they might grab that coat. So, and that gives us the ability to maybe not relax, but not be so stressed out as parents. So me and Dr. D are like crazy excited. Dr. D told me I'm not supposed to say this is the best episode ever, but there's like a 99.9% chance, maybe 100.
Say it.
Yeah, this will probably be our best episode ever. And what I'm hoping our audience takes away from this is just some tips that you could even just reorderate, like rethink about how you're doing parenting, right? So I want to turn it over to our guests. One, thank you so much for doing this. We're big fans. I read your article and I was like, holy moly, this is for me. Because like I co-host a podcast, but I'm by no means the star. I am just a dad trying to not like completely scar my kids. I want them to have less therapy than me when they get older. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Whoever wants to go first. We really appreciate you guys doing this, and we're just thrilled to have this conversation with you all.
I just want to say one thing, which is to address the "I'm just a dad" comment. And I think a point of our article is that being a dad, you have a lot of expertise, and Julia and I want parents to start relying on their own experiences and knowledge, and actually stop listening to parenting experts like us.
Isn't that our job, to work ourselves out of a job? Like, so ironic.
We're the unparenting experts, I think.
The unparenting experts. Awesome.
Love that.
Without further ado, Dr. Camilo Ortiz, will you introduce yourself first then?
Sure. So I'm a professor of psychology at Long Island University. And I do some other things, including writing about these topics. And my latest thing is I've developed a new treatment for child anxiety called independence therapy, which is similar to a lot of what we're going to be talking about. And it involves getting the kid out of the therapist's office and doing some fun but challenging things. And we're finding that when kids do that on a fairly regular basis, what I call mega doses of independence, their anxiety tends to go down pretty quickly. And we're studying that on a bigger scale now to see if that's actually true.
Yes. Love it. Amazing. And Dr. Mark Burch?
Yeah, I'm a clinical child psychologist, and I started my career at McLean Hospital working in an intensive outpatient program for kids with anxiety and OCD. And a lot of the work there was with parents and families. And I run my own group practice called Do What Works, but that has remained my primary interest. And I work with a lot of anxious kiddos, and honestly, often they're even more anxious parents. And Camilo and I crossed paths at a conference almost 2 years ago now, where we were both presenting on kind of different versions of this topic. And we're like, we got to get together. We got to talk more about this. So that's my background.
Amazing.
So is it usually the parents that are more anxious or the kids?
That's a great question. I would love to hear the other clinicians' takes on this call. And I should say, I'm just a mom. I'm a parent myself as well. And the amount of empathy I think I grew after having my own kids in my clinical hat is remarkable, because it's awful to see your kid struggle. I get it. And if your kid is experiencing like clinically significant or pathological levels of anxiety, it is gut-wrenching as a parent. But I think at least in some of my early graduate training, I didn't appreciate the extent to which the whole family system needs support in learning to back off and to kind of step back and give kids a chance to learn to cope with that anxiety. And so I love getting to work with parents because it's tough on us too. And there's so much we can do.
I'll just add, there are the clinically anxious parents, but then the much bigger group is what, Julia, I think that you coined the term like pathologically unsure of what to do, or what, do you remember?
Pathologically uncertain about how to raise their own children, I think was my line, which, I mean, I get it.
So that's the thing we're really trying to get after, which is parents, even when they are doing completely reasonable and logical things, still feel very often like there's something wrong with what they're doing, or there could be a better way. And this like nonstop search for optimization gets you like 1% more in outcomes, but makes you 8 times as anxious. And in terms of a ratio, it's just not worth it. Plus, as we talked about, when parents do more, they often are getting worse outcomes. So we're trying to get parents to understand that.
Yes, and we definitely want to dive into your article, but that's so interesting what you guys both said around, because one topic that comes up all the time, and this reminded me of this, was parenting guilt. It, like, I don't know, Dr. D, you could speak on this a little bit more, but like, it just seems like there's so many parents that are like kicking themselves all the time and stressing out about these small interactions with their kids. And like they're hyper focused on it. And it was so interesting what you said about like you're hyper focused and maybe you're getting a 1% better outcome, but is it really worth it? Right?
Yeah, there's too much advice out there. I'm sure both of you would agree. Like there's just too much advice coming at us all the time in different formats. And it's too much, right? Like our brains are not designed to process this much. And I think that's part of what contributes to, I love that term, Julia, the pathological uncertainty, because, like I thought this was a good choice, seemed logical. And I know you talk about this in your article about parents are just not trusting their gut anymore because sometimes what they're hearing doesn't mesh with their gut, and instead of being like, I'm not listening to that person, I'm doing it my way, which is how probably all of our parents did it, right? Yeah. Like they're now wondering, but that person knows, and that person has the degree. This goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, Camilo, like, gee, you said I'm just a dad, but like you're a dad, like you have all your lived experience, right? And so just because someone has a degree in something doesn't make them necessarily better at parenting your child, right? Because you're doing it 24/7, 365, right?
I think we find this parenting guilt particularly heartbreaking because when you look at measures of effort and time and money that parents are putting into their kids, they have never been higher than they are now. Yet we feel more guilty than ever. So that is puzzling and heartbreaking to us.
Yeah. And I think that the availability, to your point, Danielle, of just the parenting advice that's at our fingertips. You sit with that moment of uncertainty that is part of being a parent. I mean, it's part of being a human, right? I'm not sure how to proceed. This thing just happened to my kid on the playground. How should I respond? And it's so uncomfortable to sit in that space of, I don't know the right response. But now with a click, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, and we're being fed these scripts. And it's, the anxiety lens would say we get that hit of initial kind of comfort and calm, like, there is an answer. There's a black and white way to do this, and we feel better. But in the long term, it keeps parents really trapped out, because it, one, undermines their sense of, oh no, I can handle this myself. I'm just a dad who can figure it out. But it also kind of keeps them stuck coming back to these experts, and on these social platforms for advice. And that's tough. That's really undermining, and it maintains that anxiety over time.
Right. So the kids don't gain the confidence and the parents aren't gaining the confidence. And I know a lot of what you both do and a lot of what I do is teaching parents to model good choices for their kids to then be able to make, right? And a lot of working with the parents is like, you got to tolerate some of this uncertainty and anxiety so that your kid can see like it's okay to be uncertain and anxious. That's like a normal, healthy emotion that we all have to feel. And this idea of just encouraging parents to sit with that uncertainty and take a beat and think about how they want to respond based on what comes from inside rather than immediately seeking what someone else is telling them to do. That is a really important point that you're making, Julia, and I really appreciate you saying that.
It's such a trap because, we have this way, as Julia mentions, of feeling better instantaneously if we listen to someone on TikTok. But a 20-second video can't possibly understand your situation and give you advice that's going to match. And so parents tell us that they do these things and then they don't work. And so then there's a moment of like, so it didn't work. It must be my fault as a parent.
There's the guilt. Exactly.
Right. So then the guilt goes up, and then, all right, well, if I just watch some more of the videos, then maybe I'll get it right. And then we get this vicious cycle that ends up making everybody miserable.
Wow.
Right. That makes a ton of sense.
I think it's one thing to pull back the curtain, right? And then it's another thing to sit with the uncertainty, right? And so I think that's where this idea of doing less, I think that fits in really nicely to it, because it's like, okay, in some weird way, I am doing something, I'm doing less, and I'm tolerating it and I'm following the instructions, even though it's really hard. But I think it having that space gives parents that opportunity to reconnect with like just your parent gut. That inner wisdom that we all have that doesn't always feel certain or feel right, but is worth listening to.
So I know, go ahead, Dr. D.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing about what Julia, what you were just saying, what you're both just saying, which is this idea of it can be really hard to tell parents like do less, right? And one of the things I want to ask you, like, how does one do less? But you're already kind of launching into the answer there, Julia, which is the answer is just to refocus your attention on what you are doing, which is tolerating your distress and regulating yourself, right? So taking some slow, deep breaths, talking to yourself in an encouraging way as a parent, like these are active things that you can do when you are not doing the like 15th reminder, right? So I think that's a really useful piece of advice of the way to do less is to kind of focus on tolerating the discomfort that comes perhaps with doing less or not knowing and being okay with that and practicing that, frankly.
And I think a point Camilo often makes that I really appreciate is you suddenly have all this found time. When you're not nagging your kid to put on the coat for the 15th time. And I think your phrase, Camilo, is use it selfishly, and so if that, like, maybe that's enjoying that cup of coffee a little bit more slowly this morning. So it's I think it's the like psychologically minded, tolerating the discomfort, but there's also a way to sweeten the deal. Can you just enjoy this moment a little bit more for yourself? Because I think we're so taught in this era of parenting that it's not about you. There's the guilt, right? It's a focus on your kid. It's all about the kid. And that's not a way to thrive. To your point earlier, that's more survival.
So say more about why parents being selfish, quote unquote, is actually good for their kids.
Well, we talk about what we call the 4 Ds. So that's discomfort, distress, disappointment, and danger. And what we worry about is that when parents are doing as much as they're doing, that they're depriving their child of opportunities, actually. And if we think about what makes for a successful adult, is one way to think about it is the ability to handle these 4 Ds. And when you step in and prevent them and fix them all the time, then kids actually don't get good at them. And what we hear from parents is the first time kids have to be uncomfortable or in distress or deal with danger is when they go to college. And so then you're not there, actually. So this is the time for lots of practice, daily practice with the 4Ds, where you're still kind of around if there's actually a disaster, but you don't need to step in for almost all of these situations. That's our worry.
And I think we use selfishly, correct me if you think of this differently, Camilo, but kind of tongue in cheek, because I think in this cultural moment, it is framed as selfish. But if you want a balanced life, you're doing things for yourself as a parent. And it just so happens, as Camilo's talking about, it's good for your kids as well, if we want them to be functioning adults.
Yeah, and it's good. It's also good for the kids too, because if I'm not parenting from such a place of lack, I become a better parent, and I'm handling situations where I do have to get involved much better than I would if I was like way up here, up to my arched hair from a stress standpoint, right? And that's better for our kids too. Than a calm Jake is better than a stressed out Jake.
Yeah, that's where independence activities really come in, because it's actually really hard for parents who are in the same physical space as their child to not step in. And an independence activity by definition means the parent is not there. And so you cannot step in. So if your kid takes a bus to school by themselves, or bike rides to a pizza place with friends and you're not there, that is sort of this idea on steroids, and that even if things do go wrong, and they will go wrong, most of the time totally manageable, you just physically are not there to step in.
Yes, I love that. I want to talk more about the independence therapy, but there was a line in your article that really hit me, which is that today's working mothers spend as much time with their children as stay-at-home mothers did in 1975, and not just doing homework, although they're doing that too. And that really struck me, both as one of these moms, but also like, wow, that really feels true. That's incredible. And that goes to your point. If we're always there, if we're working full-time jobs and we're there as much as parents who are not working full-time jobs, they had to have been giving their kids more independence naturally. That just had to, right? Like their time is finite, right? So something had to give. And so I think that speaks really nicely. And I'm not sure, maybe you can talk about it, if that was sort of the genesis, or where the genesis came from of the independence therapy. And if you want to talk a little more broadly about like how you kind of decided to write this article, we'd love to hear more about those two things.
I'll just say one thing about that stat, which is I've been thinking a lot about what sort of meta messages it sends to kids that parents are always there. And one of the things that I don't have data on this, but I wonder whether it actually is encouraging a self-centered view of the world, that these adults exist to make sure that my life is smooth. And I don't love that message. And so one of the things that I hope is happening when parents are there less is that kids actually start to appreciate their parents a little more when they are there. So that's just kind of an aside. What you said made me think of that. I can pause here, or we can talk about independence therapy if you have any thoughts, Daniela, about that.
Well, I was just going to say, like, that fits with a lot of the internet parenting advice that's coming out of, like, you need to be with your child to soothe them. You need to be with your child all the time. You need to kind of they need you all the time, right? And I'm always thinking about these, and like, is this more for the parent or the child? Because this seems like maybe some needy parents, right? Who like need to feel validated or whatever, need to be needed. And I agree with you. Like, then the kids, they have no opportunity to learn. Like, kids need to figure out how to soothe. Otherwise they turn into adults who can't soothe, and then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. It's a society.
Yeah. For sure.
Good point.
So yeah, I agree with all of that. The genesis of independence therapy really stems from a woman named Lenore Skenazy don't know if you guys are familiar with her, but she's the president of an organization called letgrow.org. And by the way, if you're a clinician and you want my independence therapy treatment manual for free, just go to letgrow.org and you can get it there. But she's been talking about independence for a long time. And her origin story really began with letting her own 9-year-old son take the New York City subway by himself. And within a week, she was on every talk show in the country. And I was sort of like familiar with her at a distance, but then I heard her talk and I started investigating more of what she was doing. And then we became friends. And she was doing independence activities before any of us thought of them, once a week at schools. And so there was a homework assignment called the Let Grow Project, where kids would do something they hadn't done before without any adults. And I thought this was an amazing idea. And the kids were reporting that they were feeling less anxious. And so, I copied all her ideas, and I guess my only insight was dosage. And I said, well, once a week's not enough for clinically anxious kids. What if we did this every day? And my grad student, who's now my postdoc, Dr. Matthew Fassman, and I talked about, can we actually turn this into a psychological treatment? And so we wrote up the manual, and then we published a piece in the New York Times with Lenore, and 4,000 clinicians have downloaded this free manual and are using it around the world. And we're actually studying how they're using it. But so far the results seem really good, and it's only 6 sessions, and it appears to work quickly and well. And I can certainly say more about that.
Well, so how can parents whose kids are not in therapy with a clinician who's using this, how can parents just take some of the concepts from what you're doing, even in their non-anxious children, and help them develop more independence? And for me, this is about resilience, right? Like when we're independent, when we're coping, when we can handle the tough stuff, we build resilience, we feel good about ourselves, right? And this is so good for kids developing into adolescence, developing into young adults. So can you give parents some suggestions about how they might think about this so they can just kind of keep it in their minds for impromptu opportunities, maybe?
I'll just give 2 practical suggestions, and then maybe Julia, you can say a couple of other things for parents. But go to letgrow.org, and there's a ton of free materials for parents and for teachers and for clinicians about literally how to increase independence in just a couple of weeks in your child. And then read our piece in the Free Press, because it's, as you mentioned before, it is very specific about from day one what you can do. And this is something Julia and I talked about a lot, which was most parenting advice from professionals is helpful, but it adds a burden to parents. It gives them things to do on day one. And so you're taking a stressed out, overwhelmed parent, and you're saying, now play with your kid for 20 minutes a day. And we all have the experience, that clinicians on this, that they will often come back and feel guilty that they didn't do it enough or it didn't work. And now they feel even worse about themselves. So we were like, what are things that we can do that from day one actually lower the load on parents and actually lead to more effective outcomes? There is this Goldilocks scenario where you can do less and get better outcomes right from the beginning. And that's why one of the first steps is to make fewer commands. And we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think jumping in there, I have 2 young kids right now, and even having co-authored this piece and I think about it all the time, I literally find myself, I put my hands over my mouth sometimes. Or this morning, coming off a Thanksgiving break, trying to get my little boys out the door, and they're not putting on their coats. And my husband was laughing at me because I wanted so badly to give a command, and I'm kind of shaking my hands, like, don't do it. And I left the room, and the coats got put on. Actually, one did not, and he went out and went, "It's freezing," and ran back in and put the coat on. So it's like, yes, there we go. But I think really working to cut those commands is such a helpful kind of concrete first step. And I think anybody who's listening, who's not sure what this sounds like in this home or in their home, or is feeling skeptical, monitor. Do like a 15-minute period of you and your kids, and just tick off how many commands you give them. And then bonus points, how many times do they not listen to you? As Camilo and I were writing this piece, I started doing this in my own life, again, as a psychologist who theoretically knows this stuff. And I just constantly, I say my kids' names probably hundreds of times a day, such that it's just white noise for them, you know? And so little tweaks like that, only using their name if you're standing next to them and saying, put your shoes on now, please. And that's the one command, can make a really big difference. I think also going and being close to them. I'm like a yeller from across the house, and then I have to yell it 10 times, you know, for the thing to happen. So reducing commands and that sneaky thing about how many times do you say their name can be a good place to start. I think as well, independence, there's micro moments constantly, like the independence activities that, you know, are part of independence therapy and that every parent can do. But there's also, I mean, daily, so many chances to just back off, you know, let them run ahead of you to the playground. Let them, you know, yesterday sledding, we just got our first snow here in Utah. And I saw some very, very nervous parents kind of, no, you can't go down the hill. I'm going to pull the sled. I think it's going to be more fun for you if you back off and let them independently pull the sled up. So just, it doesn't have to be a big song and dance. That's, again, the whole idea of less is more, just looking for micro moments to back off.
And I'll add one thing to that, which is that for parents, it can be scary to not make a command, because the thought is, well, what if something bad happens? So we take that example of like running ahead to the park. As clinicians, we have to acknowledge that there could be an increase in danger or risk to parents. But what we ask them to do is to look at the other side of the equation, which is, what happens if we don't allow more independence over time? And what we find is that's a different kind of risk that then accrues over time, because as we mentioned, kids are then less capable of handling discomfort and distress and danger. And so now we have two kinds of risks that we're talking about, as opposed to just allowing independence, which increases one kind of risk. And when parents see that equation, then they open up a little bit to this idea that there may be some baby steps they can take. And we ask parents often just one command. Let's try this week. Let's do a little 1 week experiment. You're not committing to anything, of taking away one command that, in the best case scenario, has its own natural consequence. And the code example is such a good one. That's a far better teacher, the cold your son felt, than any lecture from a parent. And we find that parents are willing and able to do something like that.
I'm no longer telling my kids to put on their coats. I could do that one.
But it's really incredible. So like, we had an example last week in our family where my bigger little wanted to ride a scooter. So we ride bikes to school. We live really close, and she wanted to ride a scooter, and scooters take like 3x the amount of time as a bike. And I knew we were like tight on time. And I, like, with the article fresh in my mind, I was like, okay, let's go. Puts on her helmet. She somehow managed to take this like wobbly scooter that we have, which made it even harder, and was like huffing and puffing. And then like we could hear the bell from the first bell from the distance. So I didn't think we were going to make it. We managed to make it by like, you know, skin of our teeth kind of thing. And then at pickup later, she said, when she was saying goodbye to the person who does the like aftercare program, she's like, I'll have my bike tomorrow. And I was like, yes. Like, I didn't even say anything except like hurry up a few times, because if you don't want to have to go all the way around the school to the late entrance, you're going to have to speed it up. But it was so powerful. And I know if we got into like head to head, don't take the scooter, I want to take the scooter, like every day I would have been fighting her about taking the scooter. And instead, one time of exhaustion and stressful, you know, scooting to school. Still a miracle. Like, I'm still pretty impressed with her ability to make it on time. And she does not have my athletic genes. They are far superior. But that said, like, it was so cool to see that exactly what you're talking about in action. And I think for parents, maybe that's the thing, is like, take a few risks and then watch it pay back. And then it will become easier after you've tried it yourself a few times and seen the benefits and seen the results.
Absolutely. And we ask parents in the first session of independence therapy to think about some of their fondest memories as kids. And by the way, they're always independence activities. This is why, cartoons and Disney movies don't have adults in them, is that
Right.
kids doing stuff on their own is so exhilarating,
Right.
and they learn so much from it. And then we ask them, so would you allow your kids to do these things? And the answer is always no. And like a good psychologist, we just sit there in the silence of the weight of these two statements happening at the same time. And then you basically see, it's almost like you can see the inside of their brains becoming more flexible. And then they usually smile. And then that opens them up to this idea of at least experimenting with something like what you just did. And I just love that example because you didn't get into a fight. Maybe it was a little harder at first because you had to wait for her. But think of all the fights you just saved yourself because she learned that lesson. So even in terms of like selfish with your time, this is great because it will save you much more time than the other approach.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah. And it's that great kind of virtuous cycle, right? Where you're saving time versus I can imagine even for myself, the Instagram rabbit holes I might be tempted to pursue. And I'm like, how to convince child that Scooter is not fat, and then you're trying the script and the script backfires. So you try another script, and so it really saves time.
Right. So I want to just go back to one thing you were saying a few minutes ago, Camilo, about, sorry, Julia, you were saying about the going up the hill and the parents like grabbing the sled for them. And Camilo, you were saying letting them run ahead to the playground. And like, I think parents today are more scared of danger. And you even wrote this in the article, like 50% of parents think that 2 10-year-olds playing in the playground are going to get kidnapped or something, right? Like that's a very high number in relation to the stats on kidnapping, right? And so like, why are parents, do you think, today more scared? And is there any suggestion you can give them to help feel less scared of the risks or dangers? Because I think that's the thing that a lot of time causes parents to make these non-independent, encouraging decisions for their kids is just like they're afraid of the risk.
Yeah, I'm a weird dinner party guest to have because I'm always preaching about crime statistics when I hear people expressing these kind of views. But actually, because I think we actually just statistically, and it's not black and white, but we do live in an incredibly safe time compared to raising children throughout most of human history. And I think as parents, we care, we're scared, we love our kids, and we have cognitive biases such that we pay attention, when we hear these horror stories, and our algorithms through how we get our media promotes these horror stories. And so the way, our brain evolved is to go, risk to my progeny, save the kids. And we start to overestimate the amount of risk that is actually occurs, exactly like you said, how afraid parents are of kidnapping. And so the number one piece of advice I give parents is to actually what are the statistics? Is this more of an anxiety kind of framework of how safe the world is, or is this real? And Let Grow has an amazing page. This is the one I text to everybody mid-dinner party saying, look at this, can you believe this? But Let Grow has incredible statistics on just the likelihood of, every parent's worst nightmare outcome occurring. And it's so incredibly low. And so I think sometimes having that, and then with Camilo's point earlier about overprotecting, helicoptering, not granting independence is not a risk-free option. The problems might come down the road. They might not be as salient and scary as the idea of kidnapping, but your kid is still at risk of a lot of difficulty down the road.
Yeah.
I like to think about it. That's all totally right. And I also like to add the evolutionary piece of it, which is that our brains are threat detectors, and it is their job to keep us alive. And I just read a book where someone was talking about this, and they were saying, 1,000 years ago, the bubonic plague wiping out your whole family would create the same reaction that we see now when your Wi-Fi doesn't work. So our brains will sort of calibrate to the safety that exists or the level of discomfort that exists. It has this job, which is to just look for problems and get upset and try to find solutions. And it's not very good at understanding sort of relative problems. It just, whatever is the biggest problem for you, that's where your brain is going to go. And if that means, your Wi-Fi is not working on an airplane, something that didn't exist even 15 years ago as a thing you could do, that will send you into a rage, just like, he's being a little tongue your family dying from the plague. But I think there's some truth to that. And so in terms of like, we can't change what's in our brains, but I generally suggest to parents to watch less news, because it's literally their job to engage you. And the best way to engage someone is to scare them. And so I don't blame them for doing that. They're working with contingencies just like we are.
Right.
But less news generally makes you less anxious as a parent.
Yes.
That makes perfect sense.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And I think, Julia, your point of like, of course we click on news because it's interesting, right? Like the scary stuff, right? So we're clicking on these stories, and this isn't like newspapers of old, right? We're talking about, social media where the feed is going to literally feed us more of this. And so I think that also messes with our statistical heuristics about what we think is we're seeing too many of these stories. It's not saying like there is a 0.005% chance of this happening, and now we're going to feed you 40 stories like this, right? And so I think it does make us more alert to the danger and scared of the danger. And so I think that advice, Camilo, read less news, don't look at social media as much, stop clicking on those articles, even though they're really attractive, clickbaity. Like, I do also think that can help recalibrate too. So I think those are all really, really good suggestions.
Yeah, we don't see news articles of kid goes to park and comes home safe.
Exactly.
I don't know if this was in our article, but somebody calculated how long a kid would have to be at a park to, on average, get kidnapped. And it was 750,000 years.
That's on Let Grow. I quote that one all the time.
I love that statistic.
Wait, so
that's really powerful.
So there's nobody like putting a story out there that local kid went to snowball stand and had a great time with friends and went home?
Doesn't happen.
We need that. Somebody start that paper. I'll read that.
Exactly. Wow. Jake, do you have any more specific questions that you want to ask?
No,
We've talked about so much amazing stuff.
I think we covered so much, and for me, I think we talked about this a little bit. But if there's a parent that's stressed out, and I guess a helicopter parent, kind of like me, like what's the easiest way to start? Like, I guess that's what I want to get like really honed down on like today. Is if I'm a parent and this is interesting to me, like it is for me, like I want to start right now. What's the easiest way for me to start? Like, what's the first thing I could do? Is it talking to your partner? Is it like, what's that first small change that I could get started in a small way, and then I get more comfortable and I enlarge it from like, what's my first step?
I think it's, Julia, we should talk about the when then command, because we haven't really mentioned it that much. I think that's a great place to start. Do you want to say anything about that?
Go for it.
Oh, okay.
You love the when then.
I do. It's like my single favorite parenting technique, if you want to call it that. If I was going to tell a parent one thing, it would be a when then command. So just in context, once you reduce the number of overall commands you're making, and basically we're just getting rid of some low priority ones that kids don't listen to anyway, so we don't make those, is we take as many of the remaining commands as are left over, and we turn them into a when-then format. So basically, your kid says, Dad, can you drive me to the mall? And let's say that that's okay with you. Instead of just doing it, you're going to say, sure, when you clean up the clothes from the floor of your room, then I'll drive you to the mall. And if you do that, only three things can happen. The kid goes fine and does it, and we don't argue with a grumbling kid who is complying, so we let that happen. The kid goes, you know what? I don't want to go to the mall. We let that happen. Wonderful. Now you don't have to drive somebody, and you just found time for a coffee or a glass of wine, so you win. Or the kid escalates and is rude or becomes destructive, and that's more challenging, but there are certainly things that we can do about that. And the beauty of this is when you start doing when-then commands a lot, and we do them all the time, is kids will start to anticipate that this is how it's going to work from now on. And they will preemptively say, Dad, I cleaned up my room. can you take me to the mall? And now you don't even have to make the when then command. How's that for low effort? It's this beautiful cycle of instead of just doing things constantly, you're still going to do them, but we're going to require a reasonable first step from a kid. And it's a game changer from my perspective.
I love that. So when you do this, you get that. So we're also motivating the child to go do
with something that you have all the power at that point, because they're seeking you out to help them with something. So we're not working from a place of deficit. And just one thing about here's where parents go wrong is they say, when you clean your room, then I'll take you to the mall. And the kid says, I don't want to clean my room. Then parents often will try to convince the child to clean their room. And you don't need to do that. Once you make a when then command, you are done. If they don't clean their room, that's okay. And I know that's annoying. And we talk about that in the article, that you have to walk by and see that the room is dirty. But if you can tolerate that until the next thing 2 minutes later that they need from you, then all the things build over time, and then they will clean their room. Particularly stubborn kid might take a day or two, but this will work. It always does, if you can tolerate the initial discomfort again.
And not take them to the mall if they don't clean their room.
Right.
Which I think is like the biggest trap that parents are like, oh, but I felt bad. It's like, okay, but then you just kind of made a false statement. So
yeah.
Just
don't use it for things that are not optional. So you can't say, like let's say you have to take them to the doctor or something. That's not a when then command. But for things that you don't have to do, like take a kid to a mall or have them clean up some clothes, these are great.
I don't think any kid would be motivated to do anything to go to the doctor.
Right.
And it's also that y'all talked a lot about natural consequences in the article, right? Like, hey, it's also a natural consequence. If you don't clean your room, you just don't go to the mall. If you do, you get to go. It's pretty simple.
That's right.
It's a straightforward concept. So love that. Thank y'all. Look, we're over 40 minutes. I feel like we could talk to you guys for like 17 hours. So if y'all ever want to come back on again, just let us know. Send a text or something. And we would love to, because I just think this is such an interesting concept that as a parent, I've never really thought about. And I'm your everyday dad. So like, it's really something for me to think about. I'm gonna go to the website, anything that we could do to help get that message out there. Cause I think it's just so relevant for parents. And I think it'll help the kids too. Dr. D, I'm not going to do the graphic, but do you have any last word you want to end us off with?
Yeah. I think that, less is more is a really important concept. And we've gotten to a place where we think more is more. And that's not true. Parents are stressed out. They're exhausted. They're trying to keep up. They're feeling guilty. It's not working well for us. And we're too afraid to let go. And I think that everything that Camilo and Julia shared with us today I love that you gave us the rationale for why it makes sense for us to let go, because there's a risk in holding on, not just us as parents, but us feeling more anxious, modeling anxiety for our kids. Our kids are feeling more anxious or getting into these, vicious cycles, and we can turn it into a virtuous upward cycle by hanging back, letting them make some mistakes, learn from those mistakes, feel good about themselves, being able to develop more independence, and as a result, developing resilience. So there's a lot of good that comes from this. So take these really concrete, simple steps, try them out, read the Free Press article. We'll link it into the podcast so that people can see it and click through. And thank you both so much for your brilliant and really valuable advice today.
Thanks so much. And I'll just add that if you do a couple of these things, you will see how quickly things get better for you and your kid. This is not a life. We're not asking you to be uncomfortable for their whole childhood. You will see in 2 or 3 days how better you feel.
Agreed.
It's amazing.
Expect more, parents. It can feel better than it feels.
And one more time, can y'all drop, what was that website they can go to get the more information?
So letgrow.org, or my website is CB, like cognitive behavioral treatment.com. And Julia's is
Do What Works, spelled exactly like it sounds, .me. Like do what works for me.
I love
Nice.
it. And if you guys love this podcast, y'all go check out those websites, because these are just amazing concepts. My mind is kind of blown. I'm gonna have to like reflect on this. I'm just kidding, but it's just amazing. And if you like the podcast, I'm always begging, please share it, like it, subscribe, send it to all your friends, your aunts, your uncles, your sister, your brother, anybody, because we want to get this message out there and help as many parents as we can. I thank everybody. This was our best episode. It was everybody have a great day. I hope y'all had a fantastic Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome to the Parenting Puzzle Podcast with Dr. Daniela Owen, the podcast where we attempt to solve the parenting puzzle. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. It really helps us out and lets others discover the show.